Good evening, everyone, and I want to welcome you to our meeting tonight. My name is Diane Rosenberg. I'm the Executive Director of Jefferson County Farmers and Neighbors, and we're going to focus on a topic that's very important to Iowans, and that's water quality and funding for Iowa's continuous real-time nitrate water quality sensors. We have Dr. Larry Weber, the Director of the University of Iowa IIHR-Hydroscience and Engineering Program, and the Director of the Iowa Water Quality Information System, IQUIS, which operates about 60 water quality sensors throughout the state. This meeting is timely because we're about to lose funding for these sensors on June 30th, but that doesn't have to happen. Iowa legislators have the power to restore funding through the Groundwater Protection Fund. So we'll be talking about that and a whole lot more tonight. Now, water quality is now an election issue in Iowa. A global strategy group poll conducted in February found that 82% of Iowans say they are likely to vote for a candidate who makes protecting clean water a priority. Now, that's significant, and it shows how far we've come in our water quality awareness and concerns. Now, JFAN is holding this meeting tonight because there's a lot of interest in our water quality network, and Dr. Weber has a lot of solid information to share. And because it's so important to talk about these issues with our legislators, JFAN invited all of our state representatives and state senators to join us here tonight. And many are joining us, and many are here are joining us. So I actually want to thank each and every one of you for wanting to learn more about this network and for respecting that Iowans take water quality seriously and are alarmed at Iowa's high cancer rates. Now, we all know Iowa has a cancer crisis. We have the second highest incidence of cancer in the country, and we're one of 2 or 3 states where the cancer rates are rising. Of course, there are a lot of factors that contribute to cancer, but a major way that Iowa really stands out from other states is that we're heavy with industrial agriculture. About 10 days ago, the Iowa Environmental Council and the Harkin Institute released a long-awaited report called Environmental Risk Factors and Iowa's Cancer Crisis. This report looked at hundreds of studies and focused on 4 environmental areas: pesticides, PFAS, radon, and nitrates. And that one particularly is of special importance for us tonight. There's a lot of really good information in this report, and we'll put a link to that in the chat. I'm just going to share just a few relevant tidbits from that report. So Iowa's nitrate concentrations are among the highest in the nation. We have 2.5 times more CAFOs, concentrated animal feeding operations, than the next highest state, which is Minnesota. The Des Moines and Raccoon Rivers rank in the top 1% of rivers nationally for nitrate concentration. And 80% of that concentration comes from agriculture. We learned that last year with the CISRA report, the Central Iowa Source Water Research Assessment Report. Now, this new cancer report compiled data from about 70 sources and peer-reviewed studies just on nitrate alone. And it documents that colorectal, ovarian, bladder, and kidney cancer, with some other ones too, are associated with drinking water that have nitrate levels even as low as 3 milligrams per liter. Now, keep in mind the EPA limit is 10 milligrams per liter to prevent blue baby syndrome, and that really needs to be updated in light of a slew of nitrate and cancer studies. Given the risk consuming nitrate in our drinking water has on our health, you would think we should know what's in our water so we can keep the nitrate levels low. But only 4% of Iowa's water systems can remove nitrate. The rest have to manage it, and that includes people that have private wells. So if you need to manage it, you need to know what's in your water so you can be prepared to act. And that's what we're here to talk about tonight. So a word about our format for tonight. Larry is going to first talk about the IIHR Water Quality Network, and then we'll open it up to your questions. So please put all your questions in the Q&A box, not the chat, so we can see them. We may not see them in the chat. I want to be able to see them. So before any more time passes, I want to introduce Dr. Larry Weber. Larry is the director of the University of Iowa IIHR-Hydroscience Engineering, Hydroscience and Engineering program, and the Iowa Water Quality Information System. He leads the Iowa Watershed Approach, a 5-year statewide research project to enhance Iowa's flood resilience and water quality. He's also the co-founder of the Iowa Flood Center. Larry is professor of civil and environmental engineering and the Edwin B. Green Chair in hydraulics at the University of Iowa. He serves the state of Iowa as a member of the Iowa Water Resources Coordinating Council, and he serves on numerous state and federal agency committees related to water sources planning. Larry, thank you for being with us here tonight and for sharing all your expertise. And now I'll turn this over to you.
Great. And thank you for the invitation this evening, Diane. And of course, as always, thank you for all of those that have joined our discussion this evening. And Diane, if you could please confirm for me that you can see my PowerPoint slides.
Yes, I can see them.
Wonderful. So, again, thank you. This is an image just taken a month ago or so of the IIHR headquarters building. This is the C. Maxwell Stanley Hydraulics Laboratory here on the campus of the University of Iowa. And this is an iconic building in the field, in the scientific field of fluid mechanics and river hydraulics and watershed hydrology. In fact, by the American Society of Civil Engineers, has been designated a National Historic Landmark. And like some of the other National Historic Landmarks by ASCE that you might think of, the Brooklyn Bridge, the Gateway Arch, the Golden Gate Bridge, when ASCE designated this place as a National Historic Landmark, they didn't designate the building, but they designated the program because of the impact of the people and the research on the broad area of civil engineering across this country and around the world. Some of the work that we do, we are about 200 people strong, 30 faculty affiliates around our campus, 70 full-time professional staff from PhD to master's to bachelor's to high school diploma, working on all things fluids. You can see in the far right-hand panel here, one of the surface warships that we're studying for the Office of Naval Research. I was just in DC at the Naval Surface Warfare Center 2 weeks ago, working with scientists there on the program that we have here at Iowa. We've received continuous funding to support the Office of Naval Research since 1948. So that's 78 years strong of naval hydrodynamics research here in the center of Iowa or in the heartland, equidistant from any ocean. You can see some of the other images of the research faculty and staff at work. Our work is not just in Iowa and across the country, but also internationally. We did the hydraulic design and analysis for the Thames Tideway Tunnel, which is the largest stormwater system built in the world for the City of London. That project just completed construction late in 2024 for a cost exceeding 5 billion pounds. And so quite an expensive project. Some of the images of the laboratory studies that were done to support that work are shown here. Also in our visit to DC 2 weeks ago, we had a chance to visit the Ellicott City stormwater system. This is a deep tunnel system, and on the right-hand panel, you see a few of our staff working with project managers and engineers of that project. A 32-foot diameter deaeration chamber along with an 18-foot tunnel extending over a mile beneath the city of Ellicott City has been designed for that system. Ellicott City received 2 floods in less than a 2-year period that exceeded the 1,000-year recurrence level. And you see the main street of Ellicott City where water came rushing down after an 8-inch rain happened in less than 3 hours. So just to put that into context. Of course, we have our own floods here in Iowa. And we had a great flood in 1993 that was widespread across the entire Mississippi River Basin. That was considered in most locations a flood that exceeded the 1 in 500-year event. Then just 15 short years later in 2008, we had the floods of eastern Iowa that were the 4th largest natural disaster in U.S. history at the time. Of course, been surpassed many times since 2008. But that led to the formation of the Iowa Flood Center. as a research unit within the IIHR program. And so today, as I sit here in 2026, the IHR program is now 106 years old, beginning in 1920. The Flood Center, beginning in 2009, is in its 17th year. It remains today the only academic research center focused on floods in the nation, and we are called upon by our neighboring states and states across the country as many states are wanting to replicate the work that has been done here in Iowa, as really seen as best in class research and service to our state for flood related activities. We've been funded by the Iowa legislature through a general appropriation this last year of $1.2 million. That funding level has remained flat since 2017, and we have been working with our legislative partners to encourage them to, at a minimum, give us cost of living increases and increase our budget to a more appropriate level. Over the period of the Flood Center's existence, we've leveraged the research and technologies of the Flood Center to draw into the state of Iowa over $200 million of federal support through a number of federal programs, including the Iowa Watershed Approach Project, which alone brought in $96.9 million. The Flood Center has deployed a series of water level sensors. This is one of the ultrasonic level indicator sensors with its data acquisition and processing box above it. We've improved the sensing in Iowa by adding to the USGS network, where USGS is monitoring our stream flow at 140 locations in Iowa. Those are the green symbols shown here in the Iowa Flood Information System. The Iowa Flood Center has added 270 additional sensors to that USGS network. And it has been an important piece of our flood awareness and our flood alert system. We serve many small and medium-sized communities that previously were on ungauged streams that did not have a USGS sensor upstream from them and had no warning whatsoever when floods happened. As well as to fill in some of the gaps where the USGS was not able to deploy the number of sensors necessary. The Flood Center sensors inform the USGS sensors, they inform ours. We bring all that data together here in one location. Our data are used by the National Weather Service in helping them better predict flooding across the state of Iowa. We've also been involved in developing very detailed inundation maps for some 40 largest communities in Iowa. This one here happens to show the Little Sioux River in Spencer. In 2024, you might recall that there was a devastating flood event in northwest Iowa that impacted Rock Rapids and Rock Valley and Cherokee and Spencer. And here we show the level of extent and inundation from that flood. The user could select the water depth feature and click anywhere within the blue inundated area and very quickly know the depth of water at their home or business or point of interest. And so this, again, is best in class, doesn't exist in its form anywhere else in the nation, but does serve the state of Iowa. We also run a real-time hydrologic forecast model that provides forecasts at 1,000 locations in the state, and that's compared to the 100 location forecast that the National Weather Service provides. And we're continuing to advance our flash flood forecasting. We recently hired the scientist that was responsible for creating the FLASH system, which is the flash flood forecast system that the National Weather Services across the country is now a member of the Iowa Flood Center and working to improve flash flood forecasting in the state. Our information system for quantity is also considered best in class. And here's an example where there's rainfall that's been happening over Iowa. We can show the 2-week cumulative rainfall. And then by selecting one of the sensors here at Chillicothe, down in the Des Moines River in southeast, south central Iowa, immediately you see the boundary of the watershed. You see the rainfall that lies within that boundary will flow to that exit location or that sensor location. Whereas you see other rainfall outside of the boundary that may be as heavy or heavier that will not impact that location. And so by combining USGS data and Flood Center data, National Weather Service data into one information system, we've raised the awareness and literacy of Iowans in their protection against flooding. Rainfall and stream flow are obviously important for flooding, but we're also now deploying a hydrologic monitoring network where we monitor the soil moisture and soil temperature at 2 inches, 4 inches, 8 inches, and 20 inches of depth. We have two impact astrometers for scientific grade rainfall measurements. We measure the depth to shallow groundwater as the Iowa Geological Survey is part of our team. And all of this information is transmitted back to the Iowa Flood Center. We've gotten support from Representative Hinson, Representative Miller Meeks in Northeast and Southeast Iowa. All the gold counties shown on the map have one of these sensors. We recently were informed by Representative Nunn's office that he has found congressional support to fill out this network in South Central Iowa. And we're working with some disaster recovery funds that have been awarded to Iowa following the 2024 event to build this network out in Northwest Iowa. Our hope is to have one of these sensors in all 99 counties within the next couple of years. And although the Flood Center has flood in its name, we also are monitoring, droughts. And so, as climate scientists have forecasted for the state of Iowa, our state will be seeing long, prolonged, extended, deeper droughts that are ended by severe storms and rainfall. And nothing could be more true by example than the 2024 events, where we had in excess of 20 inches of rain in a 72-hour period, again, impacting much of northwest and north central Iowa. So the reason for sharing that information about the Flood Center is that most of or all of that hydrologic information is equally important to understanding water quality in Iowa. And so, following the early success of the Iowa Flood Center, formed in 2009, when the state released its nutrient reduction strategy in draft form, I teamed up with faculty over at Iowa State University. And in FY13, we co founded the Iowa Nutrient Research Center, administered by Iowa State University. Professor John Lawrence was the founding director of the Nutrient Research Center, and he's been followed by Professor Matt Helmers in their work. And the faculty at Iowa State focus on the infield and edge of field best management practices for reducing agricultural nutrient runoff. The work of IIHR has been to leverage the experience from the Iowa Flood Center and build a network that became the nation's largest real-time continuous water quality monitoring network. We deploy these systems like we deploy our water level sensors and our hydro stations across the state of Iowa. We received money from the Rebuild Iowa Infrastructure Fund of $450,000 and a subsequent appropriation of $225,000 to deploy 23 sensors. We received funding from the Roy J. Carver Charitable Trust to deploy about 12 sensors. We received funding from the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development and a couple watershed projects to deploy another 20 or so sensors. And so in total, we have about $1.5 million invested in the equipment that has been deployed across the state of Iowa. Full cost of replacement would exceed $2 million if we had to replace that equipment today. Additionally, IIHR received of the $1.5 million appropriated to the Iowa Nutrient Research Center, roughly one-third of that funding, or $500,000, was subcontracted or subawarded to IIHR to run this water quality monitoring network and to build an equivalent Iowa water quality information system. And the panel that you see in the lower right-hand corner, again, is exactly that IQUIS system where you see the sensors that are located here. Green sensors are highlighting less than 5 milligrams per liter. The yellow sensors indicate 5 to 10. The orange are 10 to 15. The lighter red is 15 to 20, and the deepest, darkest red is 20 milligrams and above. We have the same rainfall products available here in terms of instantaneous rainfall as well as cumulative rainfall. The soil moisture, soil temperature data are all available here. This network had been funded with continuous funding from 2015 to 2022 at $500,000. And then in FY23, the Iowa legislature reduced the funding to the Iowa Nutrient Research Center by $500,000. In that first year of the reduction, Matt Helmers, the director of INRC, applied that one-third cut across all programs. And then later in FY24, we learned that that cut would be administered specifically to the University of Iowa and IIHR, discontinuing the funding for the Water Quality Network. Thankfully, we were able to quickly make connection and submit a proposal to the Walton Family Foundation that provided partial support for us to keep our network up and running through July of this year. And the Walton Family Foundation made it very clear in their awarding of funding to us that we should consider their funding to be bridge funding only, and that they would not be the source of funding long term for this water quality network. And as I said before, that will end in July of this year, after having run this network, for about 12 to 13 years in its existence. IHR has 53 sensors out there today. There are 8 sensors that the USDA has deployed on research farms of the USDA. In fact, those research farms use the same telecommunications package developed by IHR. We build that for USDA so that they can also receive their data real time in a continuous form. And those data are then shared with us and included in the IQUIS system. Likewise, the USGS runs the same water quality sensors with a different data telemetry system, but we have a partnership agreement with the USGS that also allows us to harvest their data and deploy it within the IQUIS system. So together, we have 53 IHR sensors, 8 at USDA research farms, serving an important research focus, but not necessarily serving more broadly the communities of Iowa, and 11 USGS sensors that are predominantly located on large rivers upstream from large communities. So once again, not serving small communities, not evaluating practices, not focused on small watersheds. The 53 or 60 sensors, depending on whether it was this last year or the year before, that have been deployed by IHR are deployed in about thirds, where roughly one-third of the sensors are located around the perimeter of Iowa. And you see the terminus on the western streams here, where we're monitoring the concentration of nitrate leaving the state of Iowa. Those sensors are co-located with USGS stream gauges, so we measure concentration, they estimate discharge, and together we can calculate a load in pounds per day or pounds per week or pounds per year leaving the state. And so that's around the perimeter of Iowa. About a third are located on interior streams in Iowa, upstream from mid-sized or smaller communities, perhaps located in targeted watersheds for nutrient reduction that have been identified by USDA and IDALS. And then another third are really within our research network. Those are on the inlet and outlet of conservation practices to evaluate practice performance and for very specific scientific studies on nutrient management. The sensors are really made up of 3. We have a Nitrotex sensor that measures the nitrate concentration directly. We have a turbidity sensor, and then we have an hydrosonde that can be configured to measure dissolved oxygen temperature, conductivity, and pH. Again, the total equipment support exceeds $1.5 million of equipment that was purchased, with about $675,000 of that coming directly as state appropriations from the state of Iowa. Our telecommunication system, this is a custom-built system that we have a deep cycle battery. We have a solar panel on the front of this box. We have a charge regulator. We have the guts of a cell phone, which is a cell phone modem that allows us to communicate data. We put a GPS unit on the box that puts a timestamp on the data. And so this is an autonomous system that we can go out and deploy at the bank of a stream. We did not need gridded power, and we did not need hard-lined networking communications. And so this allows us the flexibility to deploy these everywhere. And that's what makes our system unique to the USGS and other systems in that regard. Like I've already mentioned, here's an example. Click on one of our sensors. This happens to be on the North Raccoon at Jefferson, Iowa. The watershed boundary is delineated. We can see two additional sensors within that watershed up near Sac City. I didn't include the rainfall information on this particular image that was taken back in late February, but we have the same rainfall products, both instantaneous rainfall as well as cumulative rainfall. We could select and look at soil moisture information. We can look at more data here, and where we have concentration and a sensor located with a USGS gauge will calculate what the load is of nitrate per pounds per day, per week, per month, passing this particular location. And we're able to then also, based on the acres of row crop or total acres in the watershed, we can divide that load in pounds per year or per day by the acres in the watershed and produce an estimate of the nitrate loss per acre. And that allows us to normalize the nitrate loss per acre, let's say in the North Raccoon, as shown here, versus the Upper Cedar River watershed or the Turkey or the Upper Iowa or the east or west Nishnabotna and far southwest Iowa. Again, this is a system unlike any other in the world. It simply doesn't exist anywhere else. Now, nitrate and water quality has been on a lot of people's minds over this last several years, but in specific over this last year, the lawn watering ban, excuse me, that was enforced in central Iowa last summer to 600,000 customers. Nitrate levels remained high all through the fall and into January and February. As we see our climate continue to evolve and change, this last winter we had a mild winter. We had early heavy snowfall that insulated the ground and did not allow frost to penetrate into the soil profile. As that snow melted, our soils became saturated. We have a heavily and very intensely tile drained landscape. And so that tile system flowed water all throughout the January and February period, leading to high water quality nitrate levels throughout the year. We're seeing EPA commenting that the Cedar River nitrate continues to rise, threatening the drinking water system in Cedar Rapids. Ag pollution keeping Des Moines going. Trump freezing some USDA funding to farmers. It's already been mentioned, the cancer rate, and when we think about, our water and the use of glyphosate throughout, our agricultural system and its correlation, not yet proven in many ways of the causation, but certainly strong correlation with cancer. We see this pesticide bill in the legislature. But in addition to the headline stories that you might see in the local media, we, of course, are very involved in publishing scientific data. And so here I just characterize six different types of publications that have come directly from our water quality monitoring network. Doing research on the state of Iowa load to the Gulf, we contribute 29% of all the nutrients that go to the Gulf. We have three journal publications and two master's theses on that topic. Understanding the nutrient dynamics and how does our rainfall and soil moisture and landscape dynamics impact our water quality. 8 journal publications, 4 master's theses, 2 PhD dissertations. Evaluating the effectiveness of conservation practices like bioreactors and saturated buffers and nutrient removal wetlands. 5 journal papers and a master's thesis on that topic. The development of numerical models for forecasting and predicting nutrient fluxes in our landscape. 8 journal publications, 4 master's theses, 3 PhD dissertations. Analytical evaluations of some environmental chemistry, a journal publication and a master's thesis, and then overview of the network, 2 journal publications. So in total, 27 journal publications, 12 master's theses, and 5 PhD dissertations, for which I would be happy to share any interested parties a full list of those citations for their study. One example, this is a practice evaluation of saturated buffers. We're involved in developing new conservation practices working on the assessment of those, showing how effective they are over a changing dynamic hydrologic condition, which is very important to understanding how well these practices will perform and how we can work on designing those systems. It's been mentioned, and this image here comes from the CISRA report, for which I was one of the 16 scientists that served that. And I want to put this Iowa's nitrate concentrations in broader context. Sometimes we get lost in what's happening on a day by day or year by year basis, a dry year versus a wet year. But historically, here, when we look in the early 1900s, the background concentrations of nitrate throughout the Midwest are widely known to be about 1 milligram per liter. And that, in fact, is truthed out in the data that are available. In the 1940s and 1950s, that average in the Des Moines River rose to about 2.2 milligrams per liter. And over the last, 30 years or so, it's now above 6 milligrams per liter. When we put that into context with the rest of the nation, and you see the stations that were evaluated here, most of them in other parts of the country in the 0 to 2 milligrams per liter. We look at the state of Iowa, and in fact, we have the most heavily nitrate concentrated rivers in our nation. And so what's happening in Iowa is unique to the state and it's unique to the agricultural system that we have here in Iowa. And we need to think about that in a long-term perspective as we look at our history, think about projecting that forward. What will our state be with respect to nitrate concentrations in 2030 or 2050 or beyond? And that's even more concerning than where we are today. So we have also done work on studying the load leaving the state of Iowa. As most of you know, the challenge has been to reduce the nutrient load to the Gulf by 45%, with each state having a 45% reduction. And over the 20-year period of the early 2000s to 2020 or so, we saw that we had doubled the load leaving Iowa, with a 70% increase in the load draining to the Mississippi River and a nearly 200% increase in the load draining to the Missouri River. And again, that's correlated very strongly with the location of confined animal feeding operations and the manure that is a byproduct of those operations. There has been some discussion in the state about our real-time continuous network. And so here in the gold dots, you can see data from one of our sensors. This happened to be on the Upper Cedar near Janesville. 15-minute data are projected here on this image. And you see the dynamic nature of how the nutrient and nitrate concentration changes with varying rainfall and stream flow. You'll also notice that there are some larger gray symbols that occur about monthly, and those are the DNR's monthly water quality samples. The DNR runs a ambient water quality monitoring network at roughly 60 locations. We run a real-time dynamic system at roughly 60 locations. Ours provide data every 15 minutes. Theirs is a sample collected once a month. The data that the DNR collect are absolutely vital for the purpose that they are collected for, but they are not sufficient to understand the dynamic nature of how these practices function under varying hydrologic conditions. If your interest is to calculate the load and you connect those gray symbols with a straight line, that's a linear interpolation. You can sum up the area under those lines and get a load from that location. You can do the same thing with our gold information, and you see sometimes the real-time data overshoot where those linear lines might be. Other times it may undershoot at times of rainfall and surface water runoff. And the load kind of comes out on average about the same. But if you're trying to evaluate a practice, or you're trying to make a decision about whether to recreate in a water body, or you're trying to run a drinking water system, those monthly samples are simply not sufficient for those dynamic purposes. Now, where are we today? Currently, a year ago, we had 90 sensors that were out there when we include the USGS and the USDA sensors, along with the 70 from IIHR. Projecting forward, if we are unable to fund our network, then our state would be left with just the 18 sensors that USGS and USDA operates. And you can see that, yes, the city of Des Moines will still have USGS sensors upstream from it and providing information. Some of the clustered sensors are the USDA sensors that, again, are part of research farms that the USDA operates. Thankfully, we've had counties have stepped forward. Polk County in October of 2025 announced that they would provide $200,000 to support our statewide monitoring efforts. In March, just last month in Johnson County, they've communicated a commitment to 200,000 for IHR for local Johnson County water quality monitoring and some resources towards our statewide effort. And we are in ongoing discussions with Lynn County for $125,000 that would support water quality monitoring within Lynn County and on the Cedar River draining to Lynn County. Additionally, we're thankful that the Isaac Walton League GoFundMe page has raised over $50,000 that has been distributed to the University of Iowa and IIHR. But our request remains for $600,000 annually from the Iowa legislature to restore the funding for the statewide water quality monitoring program so that we can provide the type of information and resources needed across the state, not just focused on 3 counties or near 3 of our largest urban areas. Additionally, we've asked for $500,000 as we do have the need to replace some of our aging water quality sensor equipment with new sensors. But our number one request is for the annual appropriation to continue. Our work does continue on. We are involved, as I mentioned early on, in a number of large-scale federal programs. We are part of the most recent NOAA Cooperative Institute for Research to Operations in Hydrology. It is in its 5th year and working on a 5-year renewal. And so far, it looks like that renewal will be going forward. But we will be holding here at the University of Iowa and IIHR a water quality think tank that will bring 30 leading scientists from across the country. Will convene at IIHR to develop the 5-year strategic research plan for water quality monitoring, forecasting, and information systems for NOAA and the National Weather Service. Subsequent meetings will hold the inaugural meeting of this think tank group. Subsequent meetings will be held in the Chesapeake Bay, the Great Lakes, and the Gulf. And so I provide that just as context to, again, the national presence that we have in this work. And I thank you for the opportunity tonight, and I'd be happy to answer any questions should you have them.
Wonderful. Thank you, Larry. That was really informative. Really, really critical information for us all to have. Um, we have a number of questions. I want to ask one question of you. So you're asking for 600,000 minimum, plus 500,000 one-time allocation. The SISTRA report is actually recommending more, recommending that I think it's $1 million, $600, 600,000 for the nitrate funding, but another 400,000 for increasing what you're monitoring for additional toxins that many public health officials feel like are really critical to include. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Well, I can, and my colleague David Swertney could speak to that more directly. But it is clear that we recognize that nitrates are important. And there's no question about that. But there's so much more in our water that needs to be studied and understood. And I think it will be important for us as a state that we move beyond nitrate and we start to think about PFAS and we start to think about glyphosate and 2,4-D and atrazine that's in our water as well. And then furthermore, as people have asked me, Larry, are you concerned about our water? And I absolutely am. But thankfully, we have water treatment facilities that do treat our drinking water in our largest municipalities. And we may argue whether those standards that are set by EPA are low enough or restrictive enough, but at least we do have treatment facilities for the water that we drink. I'm becoming more and more concerned about the air that we breathe, which in most cases is even more poorly monitored or less monitored than our water quality, and there is no treatment facility for the air that we breathe. And I think that we're going to start to see more research in that area and more concerns develop as we learn more about the air quality in the state of Iowa.
Can you talk a little bit about how the smaller municipalities manage the water? Because you know, Des Moines, I think Cedar Rapids, so they have denitrification. I believe Cedar Rapids, and correct me if I'm wrong, but they have those denitrification systems, but a lot of small communities don't. So can you talk about how they treat their water and why knowing ahead of time is so important for them to really, protect their customers?
Yeah, and so in large part, the other smaller utilities that rely on surface water for the source water for their drinking water also then have backup systems in shallow, mid, or deep wells that they can draw from. And when they know that there is, nitrate of high levels coming to their plant, that allows them to start to shift their operations to deeper groundwater resources, which happen to be more expensive than the normal surface water treatment process. And so a lot has been made of, understanding what's happening as systems and water do flow down through the system. That's important for our drinking water. But it's also, just from a recreational perspective and folks that are out there understanding exactly what their exposure risks are as they're out across our landscape.
Okay, thank you. So we have a number of questions here. One person asked, what was the rationale for stopping the sensor funding back in 2023?
Well, I think, the rationale behind it was that Um, some of the data were communicated by Chris Jones through a blog that he was writing. I think that in some ways the creative style of his writing wasn't as well received by everybody, and there were concerns about that. And so the change was made, and the blog was shut down, and the kind of the rest is history.
And someone says, you keep mentioning how we have a unique and superior system of monitoring when compared to other states. In your opinion, how come with this glut of data we see, almost no motion in addressing these problems in the last 13 years since the inception of the nutrient reduction strategy?
Well, again, I leave that to policymakers to, answer that. We are scientists. It is our responsibility and it's our work to do this. And in fact, someone has indicated, to me at one point, that because of all of the concerns about water quality, there's this opportunity for us in Iowa to do this work. I correct them and I say it's not our opportunity, but it is our responsibility. The work and the talent that we have and the exceptional scientists that are at IHR, the systems that have been built and the studies that have been done, it is our responsibility as Iowans to do this work for the state of Iowa, to continue to forge ahead, even in these most difficult times when our water quality may be poor. We still need to do the research if we have any hope of all of solving this issue. I think as the body of evidence continues to grow, that this is an important factor in Iowa, then ultimately decisions will have to be made from a policy perspective, but I don't have any expertise in that area.
So another question, and maybe you addressed this when I was trying to scramble around and figure out what happened to the PowerPoint, but which returned. Um, so there has been a proposal for the USGS to do a study of the DNR, IIHR, USGS, USDA sensors, and I guess how they all interact. And I think that's kind of directed toward the credibility of the IIHR sensors. There has been a study that was done in 2018 that already looked at that. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, it surprised me when I learned about this study. And in fact, I think the previous study was maybe 2019. But anyway, 2018 or 19, some work was done to evaluate whether the single monthly grab samples were equivalent or had value relative to the sensors. And that's at the time when the sensors were, still in the newer technology status. They've been around for 10 years or more. That study by USGS, the findings of it looked at our data, showed that we had credible data, showed that our methodologies were the same as the USGS. The USDA sensors, like I said, we provide the telemetry equipment for them to communicate their data. This has been a long-standing partnership. And then we became aware, in this last 6 months or so, that a new study is now underway to try to question the credibility of the research that we do. Our data are scientifically valid. They're published in 30 papers and in a dozen master's theses and another half a dozen PhD dissertations. We're credible scientists that have been at this work for 100 years at IHR. And now, suddenly there's this question. Many of the sensors that were deployed for very specific purposes in the Iowa Watershed Approach Project to evaluate practices. And so, should there be a need to think about redeployment and maybe reorganizing the location of the network based on what we've learned in some of those sensors? Yeah, of course. But we do that. We're scientists that work in those areas. So I guess I'll leave it at I was a bit surprised if there's anybody questioning the data and the validity of the very incredible work that we've done. I would question, perhaps, how many other people are publishing in the broader area and context of water quality in Iowa when I put our record of academic excellence up against anybody's.
Okay, thank you. Someone asked if there's a fact sheet that we can mail to everyone, and the answer is yes. There's a briefing that was put together by Larry and John Norris. And when we send out, this meeting is being recorded, and we'll send out the recording, the link to the recording, when we get it on the JFAN YouTube page, which will likely be tomorrow. We'll send out that link to the briefing as well that goes into a lot of the information about the sensors too. Someone asked, has there been a bill to appropriate the $600,000 in the legislature this year? The hope was expressed to me, the hope was that was expressed to me was an attachment to an appropriation bill.
Nothing has moved as far as I'm aware, but I do hope that, the Ag and Natural Resources Budget Subcommittee might, take this up and find resources. We're aware that, there's perhaps as much as $20 million in the Groundwater Protection Fund that could be used for this. And so I think resources do exist if the legislature chose to fund it.
Yeah, and I want to also add that the funds in that groundwater protection fund, those are that money comes in every year from a lot of different sources, pesticide fees, fertilizer fees, among other things. So it's not like that's one pot that will go empty if money is used for the sensors. It's actually a very good place for the sensors to be funded from. Is a question, legislature may propose a compromise to transfer clean water monitoring to DNR, IDALS, USGS, etc. Why is that not a good idea? I think you sort of answered that in some other ways, but maybe
Yeah,
just go
again,
on.
I would just
Yeah.
say that, we've got a 106-year-old institute that is a group of credible scientists that are doing work. We publish our work, we communicate our work, and I think that's very important that the data not just be collected, put in a file cabinet, and not published and not communicated this information. And so I think it's important that we play a very important role for the state of Iowa.
You've got the expertise, you know, as
We
well.
have the expertise, and I think again, it's this linkage. The USGS doesn't have a system like we have that combines soil moisture, soil temperature, rainfall, stream flow, land use, land cover, has the information about the acres, has the information of the location of the CAFOs, and really integrates all that information together. I don't know of anybody else that's doing this type of work and this level of study and this level of integration.
So say the system's completely defunded. What is the impact on people and on the state? What is the real time impact? I mean, I think it's really important for people to know, how they would be affected. and how the state would be affected.
There will be a number of water reaches within the state that will be unmonitored with real-time data. The USGS will continue, there are 11 locations. The USDA will continue the work that they do on research farms focused on egg practices, but that's not serving the public. It's serving research, but not serving the communities. And so we'll be limited. I mean, we will go from 70 sensors down to about 10, plus the few on the USDA research farm. So that'll be limiting. The DNR will continue their important ambient water quality monitoring network, going out, getting a sample once a month. That will miss all of the dynamics of what happens when it rains, what happens when it's dry, what happens when we have different hydrologic conditions. We will lose information on the value and the effectiveness of conservation practices. I showed you, the saturated grassed waterway. We're doing work on saturated buffers, on bioreactors, on nutrient removal wetlands. There is no USGS monitoring of the inlet and outlet of conservation practices. We're going to lose that information. And we're going to lose this, roughly 10 to 12 years of continuous data at many of these locations where we've got now longitudinal information over more than a decade of what's happening at those locations. That will be ended. That will be disrupted.
Okay. There's one question in here that I'm going to make sure we got to. I found Safe Water Iowa. We're bringing do-it-yourself install under sink RO system. Oh, this is a um. So they're asking about the GoFundMe page, and there is like you mentioned, there is a GoFundMe page on to help support the sensors. And someone says if funding for this nationally recognized system is not restored during the current legislative session, we will need to secure bridge funding while we work to restore funding through policy. Should we more actively promote the Isaac Walton's GoFundMe page to build additional support? I mean, how practical for
You
what
know,
we
we
need.
certainly
Yeah,
appreciate what Isaac Walton League
yeah,
has done. And I would say that in addition to raising $50,000, they raised a tremendous amount of awareness,
yeah,
as have you and as have many others. The need to raise $600,000 a year to keep this program up and running is difficult to do on individual private contributions of $100 or a couple $100. So absolutely appreciate it. But we always this needs to be state supported. It would be like we have a state transportation system, but we go around and ask for money to put roadway signs up. I think it's kind of silly to think in that context. It should be a state-funded activity.
yeah. This person says, I live in rural South Central Iowa in the poorest county of the state, and as such, often neglected on political campaign trails. What can we as citizens do to help direct funding our way as well, not just the more affluent parts of the state, and permanently establish and maintain water quality monitoring also down here?
Yeah, I think that's an absolutely important question. And again, I think it would be very difficult if we do not have a locally run, a state of Iowa run real-time network. It will be difficult, if not impossible, to secure the funding to get the USGS to put a federal sensor down there. And so I would encourage anyone to continue to question local elected officials on the question of water quality and water quality monitoring. And I would enjoy learning more about that particular location. And if there's any way that we can help by installing a sensor, I'd certainly like to give it a look. As I said before, our network is deployed all across Iowa, in many cases serving very small communities that without our network would have no information.
And someone said, can you give an example of a specific municipality that might be harmed by losing IIHR sensors and how it would be harmed?
Well, I can think of Decorah up in the far northeast Iowa, a very dynamic system. The Upper Iowa River, we have 5 sensors on the Upper Iowa right now. It's one of the more pristine rivers in our state. If we lose all of our funding, those sensors will all come out.
Mm.
So that's one very simple example. We could go sensor by sensor across our network and talk about, 70 plus sensors that we've had out there. There are communities all across the state of Iowa that will no longer have information.
Can you, like, following up on that, can you talk about why it's um, beneficial for small municipal water systems to get an early warning that nitrate levels are coming down, that they're going to be high,
Yeah,
rather
again,
than just not know and all of a sudden they test and they're really high.
right. And I think this is one of the, if we go out in our system today and look, there's been some storms that have come across to Iowa, and we've seen more than doubling of our concentrations in some of these small streams. The smaller streams respond and act much more quickly. And so we're seeing some concentrations that were below 10. Okay, that would have been safe without having to do nitrate removal that have jumped to over 20 in 24 hours. And again, we could go back to the system and look at it online. We're seeing in some locations tile drainage right now approaching 30 milligrams per liter,
Mm.
nearly three times the drinking water level in Iowa.
Another question, if the sensors are defunded, how long can they lay dormant while we try to get more funding?
Well, that's a big issue. And, these are sensors, we pull them out each year because of the expense at nearly $30,000 at each location. We pull them all in late November and early December before our rivers freeze over. We bring them into the laboratory. We do maintenance on them. We do calibration checks. Some go back into the manufacturer for some annual maintenance, and then they get redeployed this time of year. And so our crews are working hard this week and last week to get the sensors back out and deployed. If we go dark and we don't keep the network running in 2 or 3 years, it's very unlikely that those sensors would be ready to go back out. At that point, we're probably looking at purchase of all new equipment. And again, it'll be in excess of $2 million to build the network back out to the current level it is today.
Mm. Mm. Another question, who
The
can,
other piece, if I could
yeah,
add to that, Diane, if we go dark, not only do our sensors go away, but the information system goes away.
yeah.
So we're no longer collecting the USGS and the USDA data. We don't have any more data to contribute. We no longer have this sort of whole hydrologic story that's complicated that we need to understand about how rainfall and storms and soil moisture are impacting this data.
And then just going back to what you said during your presentation, so there's Johnson County, Lynn County, Polk County, offering to put money up. But again, that's bridge funding. That's for 1 year, correct? And wouldn't that money be better spent in their own counties for things that they need in their counties? And if the state legislature were to you know, fund the centers from where there is money in the groundwater protection fund.
Yes, and I've made it clear to those counties, if the legislature would restore funding for us, then we would come back to the counties and say, look, we've been restored. Polk County, we no longer need, that contribution. Now, we've got more work we could do and we could accelerate some work and we could do things. Maybe some of it goes back to the county, maybe it all goes back to the county. But it's only considered to be bridge funding until we get bridged back to the legislature. And some of those counties have put restrictions on how we might use that money. And so depending on the source of funds, some of it might come from a county conservation, bond fund. That money has to be spent within the county boundaries.
Mm.
Others, if it comes from the general fund, could be used more broadly. But very quickly, we're going to have an imbalanced system if we are simply relying on counties to provide funding. We will have those that have information and those that do not.
Yeah, yeah. And that kind of goes to the question of the person that asked about their county that's on the poor side.
Very much so.
Yeah, yeah. Another question, who controls spending the money in the groundwater protection fund? Is it the Secretary of Agriculture or is it the legislature or
Well, I couldn't
what is
speak
it?
to that
Yeah.
specifically. I'm sure, or I would suppose that it is the Iowa legislature that has the spending authority over the groundwater protection fund. And only the Secretary of Agriculture could spend on funds that have been appropriated to the Department of Ag and Land Stewardship.
Okay. Let's see. A lot of questions. What is the bigger problem, animal waste or chemical nitrogen fertilizer?
Um, all of the above.
Yeah. I live in Jackson County in eastern Iowa. For a while, I collected water samples for the Isaac Walton League. I am concerned because there are many small streams here that show high nitrate rates and other pollutants, and we have one of the highest per capita cancer rates in the state. Do you cooperate with the Isaac Walton League for additional small stream data?
We do, and again, the specialists in our water quality efforts are working with watershed management authorities, with private colleges, with the Isaac Walton League, in gathering holistically information. And some of those data come in varying forms of quality. Um, citizen science is important, in informing kind of broader context of what's happening. It's also important in raising the literacy for all of us to understand what water quality levels are like. And one of the ways that we actively engage the general public is by having them use the test strips that are distributed by the Isaac Walton League to go out and learn more and see how things are changing in their own watershed, more for raising their own awareness than for serving the kind of the scientific research that we do, but both are equally important.
Okay, let's do one more question. And then um, the study questioning the validity of the data, where is that coming from?
Well, my understanding is that it's an agreement between the Iowa Department of Ag and Land Stewardship and USDA, or excuse me, and USGS.
Okay. Okay, well, I think we could probably answer questions for another hour, but um, we are getting up to our time, and I want to respect everybody's time here tonight. And Larry, I really want to thank you for coming and sharing all of this and talking with us. A really important presentation, and I really very much appreciate all the information, the depth of information, the depth of experience, the depth of everything that you're doing, at IIHR. And a lot of people have asked what they can do. So I actually want to talk about that a little bit right now because it's clear we need our sensors. It's clear that we need to know what's in our water. We need to be able to protect our health, our drinking water, our public health, all of that. So legislators could definitely fund the network at $600,000 annually with a one-time $500,000 allocation for new equipment. They could also allocate $1 million a year with a one-time allocation to increase not only nitrate funding, nitrate monitoring, but also additional toxins like PFAS, like microcystin, and stuff like that. If they were to allocate $1 million annually, that's only 32 cents an Iowan each year. It's not very much money. You think about how much a cup of coffee costs or stamp. So, so there's money in the groundwater protection fund, and um, and 32 cents annually for each one of us. It's a good investment in Iowa in Iowa's people. So with that picture in mind, I want to end with some action steps we can take. So last week, the Iowa Alliance for Responsible Agriculture, IRA, we held a lobby day, call-in lobby day for the water sensors. Phones were really busy that day. And I'm hearing that legislators are really feeling that the public wants these sensors funded. So there are ways that we can keep that pressure and that momentum up. So, we can continue this lobby day momentum by calling legislators after the meeting. The links that we had in the chat tonight, we'll send those to you. We're going to put links right now in the chat to the script that we gave people that called last week to when they were calling their legislators, talking points, and to a more detailed briefing on the water sensors in the chat. That briefing would be a very valuable thing to send to your legislators. We'll email all of that out to you with the link to this tonight's recording. Call your legislators. Tell them how important it is to you for them to fund the sensors. Send them the briefing. Send them the recording. Ask them to watch it. Um, as I said, we'll have it on our YouTube page up likely tomorrow, no later than Wednesday. The Iowa Environmental Council has an action alert. We'll put the link here as well. It's another great way to send a message to your legislators. I suggest you do everything. The IEC reports, at least as of last week, at least 1,000 messages have been sent. So let's keep that going. JFAN, we're going to be putting together a petition for the water sensors too. We'll send that out. It's another way you can take action. If you have a legislative forum coming up in your area, attend those and ask your legislators if they will support the funding for these sensors. Thank them if they will, and if they don't support it, ask them why. Give them the briefing. Just talk to them. Um, and if you're in the Fairfield area, we're having a couple of postcard parties this week. We're going to be tomorrow night at the Fairfield Public Library from 7 to 8:30. Um, and and then we'll be at Scream Ice Cream on Friday afternoon from 4 to 6. You can come and buy some ice cream and write some postcards to your legislators. Come anytime, stay as long as you'd like. We'll have postcards, we'll have talking points, we'll have stamps, everything you need to send messages to your legislators. If you are not in the Fairfield area and you would like to get a PDF of the postcard that we're using to use in your areas, just send me an email to a director@jfaniowa.org and we'll get you a copy of that postcard as well. We have a short time to get these sensors funded, so let's use all of these opportunities to let your legislators know how important this is to you. Um, if we lose the funding, I hope we don't, but we can continue to drive this water quality issue during the November elections. So you know, clean water is a right. We shouldn't have to work so hard to have clean water, but we do what we have to do. So Larry, tonight, thank you so much for being here, for all this valuable information. Again, I want to thank all the state legislators who came to watch this presentation, and thank you for recognizing the importance of this nitrate monitoring network and joining us this evening. And I want to enjoy and thank every single one of you who also came here to join us and listen to Larry and ask your questions tonight. I hope you have.
Diane, thank you. And I also would just like to share the comment that both myself and my wife, Michelle, are from small town Iowa.
Hmm.
Two sons and their wives live in Iowa. Our granddaughter lives in Iowa. We want to stay in Iowa. We want our kids to stay here. We do this work for Iowans.
Yeah,
Uh, and so we got to come together on this issue and start to make this water quality improvement that we all need.
yeah, agreed. Well, thank you,
Thank you.
and hope everyone has a really good rest of your evening.